You've waited before, for the perfect time, for the right mood, for motivation to finally strike like lightning and tell you it's time. But it didn't. Not really. And deep down, you already know this. If you keep waiting for permission to begin, your life will stay paused forever. That's not failure. That's worse. That's paralysis, disguised as preparation. That's how most people live. Stuck in thought, stuck in comfort, stuck in the fantasy that one day they'll feel ready. But the people who move, who build, who finish, they know something different. They know that action doesn't follow motivation. Motivation follows action. That if you want momentum, you have to move before you feel like it. That's not popular advice. It doesn't trend well, but it's what works. You don't get motivated and then act. You act, and the system you build gives you results. And those results? That's your real fuel. Not hype, not dopamine, not some Instagram quote. Results. You want to know how Elon does it? It's not fire. It's not inspiration. It's the removal of friction. It's structure so cold, so mechanical, that the question, "Do I feel like it?" never even enters the system. He doesn't wait to be excited. He pre-commits to execution. That's what makes people think he's superhuman. But he's not. He's just engineered out the human excuses. The same ones you still let negotiate your future. Motivation is not a strategy. It's a sedative. It gives you a high, then drops you. You can't build your future on a mood swing. You need something that survives bad days, silence, failure, exhaustion. You need a system. One that keeps running even when you don't want to. Especially when you don't want to. Elon doesn't trust his feelings. He trusts design. He doesn't believe in willpower. He believes in constraints. He doesn't schedule for inspiration. He schedules for inevitability. That's how SpaceX happened. That's how Tesla shipped. That's how you build something when your bank account is burning, when the press calls you delusional, when the odds are so bad they make reasonable people quit. You don't show up because you feel like a genius. You show up because not showing up means death. Discipline isn't just a habit. It's a form of survival. And if that sounds cold, good. Because truth doesn't yell. It just waits. Quietly. Until someone's ready to listen. You don't need to feel powerful to become powerful. You just need to make escape impossible. The problem isn't that you're not motivated. The problem is that you're still allowing the negotiation. You still give yourself room to delay, room to scroll, room to say, later. Elon removed that room. And when you do that, when you cut off the exits and burn the script that says one day, what you're left with is the raw engine of forward motion. Not flashy, not fun, but real, durable, cold. That's what most people never find. That's what most people never build. But you can. That's the quiet truth behind every breakthrough. Someone chose consistency when everyone else chose comfort. Someone moved while the rest waited. And maybe now, maybe finally, you understand why nothing was working before. Because you were waiting for a spark instead of writing the code. And the blueprint? It's not hidden. It's right here, embedded in everything Elon's ever done. You just have to decide it's yours too. Because once you build like that, without permission, without excuses, no one can stop you. Not even you. If motivation is a myth, then something else has to take its place. You can't just delete the feeling and expect forward motion. You have to build something stronger. Something colder, something that doesn't rely on energy, but on architecture. That's the part people don't see. They watch the rocket take off. They don't see the hundreds of constraints I've already placed behind the scenes. They see the result and assume drive, passion, obsession. But the truth is, I just don't allow myself to negotiate. There is no debate. Not with emotion, not with tiredness, not with fear. The system decides before I even get a chance to question it. That's the real secret. Discipline isn't about self-control. It's about self-design. You don't resist the urge, you eliminate the option. And to do that, you need to think like an engineer. You don't ask, how do I feel? You ask, how do I make this inevitable? People still think discipline is about effort. It's not. It's about removing the conditions that require effort in the first place. I schedule everything in 5-minute blocks, not because I'm obsessed with time, but because the margin for chaos is small when you run multiple companies and each mistake costs millions. Precision isn't luxury. It's oxygen. That's why I track blocks, not moods. Why I eliminate decisions instead of optimizing them. I wear the same clothes. I eat the same things. Not because I care about efficiency, but because it kills friction. Friction is the real enemy. It's the invisible tax you pay every time you hesitate. And hesitation, over time, becomes identity. That's how people lose decades, one small emotional delay at a time. I don't give myself time to question. I wake up and the system is already moving, not because I'm special, but because I designed it that way. Most people wait to feel focused. I build my life so that focus is automatic. Most people try to push through resistance. I remove the source of resistance entirely. That's what it means to think like an engineer, not just about machines, but about behavior. You don't optimize for inspiration. You optimize for inevitability. You build constraints so strong that execution is the only possible outcome. And when you do that, discipline becomes less about effort and more about default. People say they want freedom, but freedom without structure is noise. Freedom without discipline is paralysis. I've learned that the hard way. I've seen what happens when the system breaks, when I'm forced to rely on willpower, and every time it fails, because willpower isn't consistent. It doesn't scale. Systems do. That's why I don't trust feelings. I trust design. Not design for beauty, but design for inevitability. That's what lets me build under pressure, ship under chaos, work while being hated, doubted, attacked. The outside world changes. The internal system doesn't. That's what gives me momentum when everything else is burning. That's what makes people think I have more energy. But I don't. I just have fewer choices, fewer chances to run. The rocket doesn't lift off because someone's inspired. It lifts off because thousands of constraints were followed without compromise. That's how I treat productivity. As physics, as code, as constraint. You want to be consistent? Then you need to remove permission from the equation. You want to be productive? Then don't ask, how can I do more? Ask, what must exist so that doing it becomes non-negotiable? That's the shift. From trying to choosing. From choosing to designing. And once you cross that line, once you start building yourself like you'd build a launch sequence or a neural net, everything changes. Suddenly, output becomes default. Progress becomes mechanical. Execution becomes the baseline, not the exception. And that's where you finally start winning. Not because you're hyped, but because you've stopped giving yourself a way out. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. The most disciplined people aren't stronger. They've just made quitting harder. That's the algorithm. You don't need more grit. You need fewer exits. And if you've made it this far into this thought, if your mind is still tracing the lines behind what I'm saying, then part of you is already inside the system. You don't need to find motivation. You just need to finish building the code. Everyone says they want to be productive. What they mean is they want the feeling of progress without the process, the glory without the grind. But real productivity doesn't feel like success. It feels like silence. It feels like repetition. It feels like doing the same thing so many times your brain starts screaming for novelty and you ignore it anyway. That's the cost. You want deep work? Then you need to kill distraction. You want focus? Then you need to disappoint people. You want momentum? Then you have to say no to almost everything that isn't aligned. People talk about burnout like it's always from overwork. But the truth is, most burnout comes from working on the wrong things. From chasing approval instead of shipping results. From trying to please everyone instead of building something so real it stops needing validation. I've learned that the more useful I became, the lonelier it got. Because when you're productive on a level that threatens people's comfort, they don't clap. They criticize. They mock. They question your balance, your humanity, your sanity. But they don't see what you see. They don't feel the urgency you feel. That's why you must protect your system from their noise, because if you let their expectations infect your architecture, you'll start optimizing for applause instead of impact. That's how most people fail, not because they were lazy, but because they became available to the wrong voices. Discipline gets you started, but silence keeps you sharp, and not everyone can live in silence. Most people need to be seen, need to be liked, need to be praised. But praise is a drug, and drugs cloud the code. When I'm most productive, I'm invisible. Not because I'm hiding, but because the real work isn't loud. It doesn't post. It doesn't trend. It compounds in the background while others chase attention. You want the truth? The most productive days of my life didn't feel epic. They felt mechanical, boring, even brutal. But they were necessary, because that's how hard things are built, when no one's watching. You want a ship like Tesla? Then build when it's dark. You want to move like SpaceX? Then learn to love the unglamorous. That's the paradox. The more impact you want to make, the more repetition you must endure. Not inspiration, repetition. Again and again and again, until the muscle is built, until the margin of error disappears, until the work becomes a reflection of your integrity, not your mood. That's not a feel-good message. That's a brutal one. But it's also the one that works. Most people never break through because they stop when it stops feeling exciting. They pivot too early, quit too clean, chase too wide. But the people who ship, they stay in the trench. They finish. Not because they feel like finishing, but because finishing is part of the identity they've already chosen. That's the deeper productivity no one talks about. Not task lists, not time hacks, but alignment. Brutal alignment between who you are and what must be done, regardless of emotion, regardless of reward. That's where the real power comes from. And it's not free. It costs your comfort, your image, your popularity. But it gives you leverage. It gives you signal. It gives you momentum that can't be stolen by mood. And if that trade sounds painful, good. Because pain means it matters. Pain means you're alive in a world that wants you numb. And if you're willing to keep going through that pain, without applause, without escape, you'll realize you don't need more motivation. You just need a reason that hurts enough to never stop. Comfort is the silent killer. It doesn't scream. It doesn't attack. It whispers. It rewards you for nothing. It praises you for staying still. It convinces you that you've earned rest, when all you've done is avoid discomfort long enough to forget what progress feels like. That's how comfort works. It feels good right before it rots you, and no one notices it happening because comfort is socially acceptable, encouraged, even marketed. You're told to slow down, take a break, treat yourself. But what they're really saying is, numb yourself, delay. Wait until the urgency passes. Wait until the fire dies out. That's how most people lose their edge. Not in one dramatic fall, but in quiet surrender to convenience. The couch, the phone, the scroll, the excuses. That's the new addiction. Not chaos. Not hardship. Ease, predictability, safety. Elon doesn't hate comfort because it's soft. He rejects it because it makes you forget you're supposed to build something. And once you forget that, you become available to everything else. Distraction, outrage, envy, passivity. The system doesn't break you. Comfort does. That's why he sleeps in factories, why he strips down routine until it's boring, why he wears the same clothes and eats the same meals and kills variety on purpose. It's not about minimalism. It's about removing the seduction of choice, because choice is where comfort hides. That little moment where you ask yourself, do I really have to? Can this wait? Do I feel like it? That's the doorway. And if you walk through it enough, it becomes home. But Elon doesn't give himself that door. His environment is built like a constraint. His days are pre-decided. His systems leave no room for softness to creep in. And that's not cruel. That's clarity. Because every ounce of comfort you inject into the process dilutes the precision of your execution. It adds noise. It adds options. It adds delay. And over time, that delay becomes identity. The comfortable version of you is not the full version. It's the sedated version. The version that flatlines quietly while life slips past. That's why this isn't about discipline anymore. It's about war. A quiet war. One you fight every day against the most dangerous enemy, the desire to feel okay when you haven't earned it. Real progress doesn't feel relaxing. It feels demanding, confrontational, disorienting. And that's exactly why it works. Because it changes your nervous system, rewires the expectations you've built around ease. And if you can hold that discomfort long enough, you don't just become stronger. You become unavoidable. People look at Elon and think it's about speed or vision or ambition, but none of that matters without this one thing: discomfort by design, intentional friction, self-imposed constraint. That's what keeps the system awake, and that's what most people never build because it's painful, not physically, existentially. You start questioning your own cravings, your own pace, your own need to be liked or feel balanced or keep up appearances. You realize how much of your life is built around avoiding internal resistance. And when you finally face it, you see the truth. Comfort is the cage, and the door has always been open. But you stayed, because it was warm, because it was easy, because no one called it failure. But deep down, you knew. You knew what it was costing you. And you still know now. If your heart's beating faster reading this, that's not fear. That's your potential waking up. Don't put it back to sleep. People think freedom means doing whatever you want. That's the illusion. Real freedom isn't the absence of structure. It's the presence of control. Not over the world. Over yourself. Over the urge to drift. Over the instinct to quit. Over the reflex to run when things get sharp. That's the paradox. The freer you want to become, the more discipline you need. Because without it, everything owns you. Your cravings own you. Your notifications own you. Your mood owns you. Your fear owns you. And you can dress it up as freedom all you want, but if you can't do what needs to be done, when it needs to be done, you're not free. You're trapped inside a loop of permission, waiting to feel ready. Waiting to feel safe, waiting to feel like it. That's not liberty. That's dependency. That's addiction to ease. That's bondage wrapped in comfort. Elon doesn't choose discipline because he likes pain. He chooses it because anything else is a cage. A silent one. The kind that looks like rest, but feels like rust. The kind that tells you to slow down just long enough to forget what momentum feels like. He doesn't wake up motivated. He wakes up inside a machine he built to move with or without him. That's freedom. Not the ability to say yes to everything, but the power to say no. No to distraction. No to unnecessary emotion. No to the part of yourself that wants to stay small. That's what people never tell you. That freedom isn't fun. It's fierce. It's the ability to override yourself, to act without begging your feelings for permission. To move even when your mind says stall. To build even when no one believes yet. That's not restriction. That's self-respect in motion. Discipline is how you reclaim your time from entropy. How you take back your life from the algorithm. It's how you rise above the noise, not once, but every day, relentlessly, until rising becomes your default and comfort can't find you anymore. Most people think they're free because no one's forcing them. But they're still chained to sugar, to screens, to validation, to the need to be liked, to the fear of missing out. Elon isn't disciplined because he's stronger. He's disciplined because he understands that without it, he doesn't own his trajectory. And when you don't own your trajectory, you don't own your life. You're just reacting, bouncing from mood to mood, opinion to opinion, distraction to distraction. That's the opposite of freedom. That's drift. And drift kills potential more quietly than failure ever could. The truth is, most people are tired not from working too hard, but from negotiating with themselves all day. Should I? Should I not? Do I feel like it? That's the real exhaustion. That's the leak. Discipline plugs the leak. It replaces doubt with direction, noise with rhythm, chaos with sequence. And when you run your life on sequence instead of chaos, everything sharpens. Your mind, your time, your outcomes. Discipline doesn't shrink you. It forges you. It removes the unnecessary until all that's left is what must be. And when what must be becomes what always is, you're no longer chasing freedom. You've built it, quietly, relentlessly, systematically. And if you've made it this far, if you've followed this line of thought through the discomfort, the denial, the pressure, that means you're not lost. You're just done being owned. Now you're ready to architect something sharper, something colder, something no one can take from you, not even you. By now you've heard it all. The death of motivation, the architecture of discipline, the pain behind real progress, the cage of comfort, the lie of freedom without control. But none of it matters unless you build, unless you sit down with your life and start asking better questions. Not, what do I feel like doing? Not, what sounds exciting this week? The real question is, what must exist so that execution becomes inevitable? That's how Elon thinks, not emotionally, systemically. He doesn't rely on mood. He removes it. He doesn't chase inspiration. He pre-codes output. The schedule decides. The system executes. And you're not different. You just haven't designed your life to the level your vision demands. You want focus? Then engineer your environment so it doesn't give you a choice. You want consistency? Then eliminate friction before it appears. You want momentum? Then remove the brakes you keep calling balance. You don't need more ambition. You need fewer exits. Fewer moments where you ask if it's worth it. You already know it is. The problem is, you haven't made it harder to fail than to succeed. That's what Elon does. Every system in his life reduces the gap between intent and action. It makes progress the default, failure the friction. That's not discipline. That's design. People think systems are for robots. That structure makes you less human. But without a system, you're not free. You're a slave to distraction, to dopamine, to other people's expectations. You react. You cope. You drift. And then you wonder why nothing changes. Elon doesn't have more time than you. He just spends none of it negotiating with himself. His calendar isn't a list. It's a command line. His routines aren't habits. They're safeguards. His execution doesn't depend on energy. It runs on architecture. That's what you're building now. If you're still here. Not a morning routine. Not a to-do list. A system, a personal operating system that strips away what's optional and automates what matters. And it doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be in place. Because once it's in place, you don't have to win the war every day. You just have to follow protocol. The most powerful people aren't better than you. They're just better at not giving themselves a way out. That's what freedom really looks like. Not chaos, not randomness. A system that protects your purpose from your mood. A structure that saves you from your weaker self. That's what Elon built. And if you're still listening now, that means you're ready to build yours. Not tomorrow. Not when it feels right. Now. Before the old version of you wakes up and drags you back into softness. Before the world offers you another hit of comfort disguised as rest. Before your potential forgets it ever knocked on your door. Build the system. Or keep being built by someone else's. If you've made it this far, that wasn't entertainment. That was transformation. Not flashy, not loud, but sharp. Exact. Quietly violent in all the right ways. You don't need applause. You need alignment. You don't need hype. You need architecture. And if something inside you has already shifted, even slightly, then don't let it fade. Double down. Let it hurt. Let it shape you. The old framework won't save you. But the new one, you just felt it form. Now build it. And if your mind is still awake when this video ends, don't stop here. The next one isn't just a video. It's the next layer of code. Subscribe to Mind of Musk. We're not building followers, we're building systems.